Get everybody after lunch. I hope everybody enjoyed lunch. Nobody here is getting real tired. Day 2. How many people are here for the first day for themselves? This is day 2 of the Public Sector Summit. How many people are just got here for the one day? All right, I like this. This is good. A lot of you guys are here for both days of the summit. It's one of my favorite events, so I'm really glad to see that people are here for both of the days. So we'll give it another minute or so to get folks trickling in. All right, we got the doors closed and everything. I guess I'm in control of this now, huh? Oh, there we go. The big green arrow, apparently, is the advance button. We can work with that. Welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you being here. This is our session for JHC Technology on enabling cloud smart, zero trust, and TIC. Right? A lot to unpack with regard to those 3 topics. We're talking about the foundation of the government moving forward. We're talking a little bit about security. And we're talking about some really, really important networking components, especially that are going to enhance your security and also help eliminate some of the bottlenecks that you're seeing when you talk about trusted internet connections. So we'll go through a lot of different topics today. At the end, we should have a few minutes. We'll do some questions and answers. Also invite you guys down in the time that's remaining to visit the JHC Technology booth. So we'll talk a little bit about who JHC Technology is, what have we done, where have we done it, right? The important things, you understand the past performance. As we talk about past performance, I want to see how many are government employees in here. How many govies we got? There we go. Okay, everybody getting a day off. I like that. How many on the contracting side? Government contractors? You don't get the day off. That's fine. Everybody's out here pressing the flesh. It's really good to have that. And I want to get some more feedback as we go along too, because I think it's interesting to take a look at the mix and take a look at the skill sets and the background of the folks that are in here as we talk through some of these components. So we'll cover what is cloud smart. Right? A lot of people have heard about cloud first, cloud smart being the follow-up to that. So we'll talk cloud smart. We'll talk cloud smart objectives, right? Because it's really important as we go through today, especially when we talk about security, we talk about cloud migration, we talk about trusted internet, to understand what are the foundational components. Why are these things important, right? It's the cloud smart objectives, the continuation of cloud first. How do we get where we need to go? We're going to talk a little bit about zero trust networking in an AWS environment. There are ways that you can do this. What are those ways? What are some of those services? And the really cool part about cloud is there's a lot of different services. There's a lot of ways in which you can enable zero trust, right? We're not going to be able to cover them all, but we're going to talk about some of the hallmarks and some of the key components of zero trust networking. And then we're going to hit on trusted internet connections. We've come a long way since TIC in 2007. So where are we today? What's coming up? Where are we in the v2.2 versus draft 3.0? What are we doing as far as TIC is concerned? What are some of the capabilities and again, some of the services and how do we utilize something like zero trust to help enable TIC without having to route through a TIC connection point? So we're going to cover a lot of ground. So there are, I'll forget it. Not that many related breakouts, I guess, at this point when we talk about TIC. I didn't see a whole lot in there. But again, as we talk about zero trust and we talk about TIC, you're looking a lot, very heavy here at the networking component that an AWS will provide to you. So a little bit about JHC Technology. Why the heck is JHC up here talking about it? The cool part for me is I start to see the industry just explode. One of the really, really neat parts to me is JHC Technology is a born in the cloud company. But we were not born in the cloud in the last year or 2 years ago. We were born in the cloud a decade ago. We started in 2010. We have never owned a server. We were doing AWS before JHC was formed. Some of the co-founders architected and deployed recovery.gov. So it's tracking a lot of the TARP stimulus funding. They saw, you know what? Cloud is the future. They're innovative guys. They're always focused on trying to push the boundaries of technology. They said cloud is where we need to go. So in 2010, JHC Technology was founded. We are a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. We have a headquarters in National Harbor. We work out of Tyson's Corner, as well as Alexandria. Our focus has always been at the intersection of technology and innovation. Cloud is the most disruptive of technologies that is out there today, and we are just getting started. We are just getting started in cloud. It's incredible. And now we're starting to see some of that hockey stick growth within the federal government, which is why we're starting to have these conversations around zero trust and TIC, and enabling organizations to use the foundation of Cloud Smart to be able to advance the message and advance the service to their constituents. So we're focused on disruption. We're focused on cloud, collaboration, virtualization, and mobility. One of our really early projects was doing virtual desktops, CONUS and OCONUS, FSMA moderate for production. So being able to enable those enterprise-wide migrations and enterprise-wide architectures and redundant TIC connections, really big first step. This was 5 years ago we were doing these kinds of things. So now the cloud industry starts to catch up with some of these TIC as a service components, all of the various pieces that go around it. So we're all about the ongoing enhancement of capabilities, right? We are a government competency holder. We are a launch partner for that. We are a government and commercial reseller. We have the DevOps competency, the nonprofit competency. We're an authorized training partner. So that's a really, really important thing, right? One of the big pieces of cloud, one of the huge holdbacks, and we'll talk about this in the Cloud Smart portion, is the knowledge and the ability for the end user, for the customer, for those that are deploying for the customer, to understand the breadth of cloud services and how they're going to relate in an enterprise environment. So as an authorized training partner, we have an authorized champion trainer within JHC that is able to go out and really spend some time working with organizations and agencies to understand how does cloud work for them, right? And we can find ways in which we kind of customize that training, right? So there are so many different aspects of cloud. How do we focus on those pieces that are most relevant for you as a customer, right? Some really good foundational stuff, but how do we take that one level deeper to make sure that you're enabled to do the things that you want to do? And we're a managed services provider. When JHC started out, it was all about getting folks to the cloud, right? And then a lot of organizations would say, okay, our guys will take it from here. That's fine, okay? There's a lot of smart people out there. But the breadth of services available in cloud today, it's making it very, very hard to rely on your 2, 3, 10, 20 person IT staff that doesn't have the background in cloud to be able to incorporate all of those technologies in a secure and compliant fashion. So we're being asked more and more, how do you help us on the managed services side? So JHC has focused on managed services, and we're adding that to the mix. And the really big one, we're a premier consulting partner. That is a huge deal for JHC Technology, and I'll tell you why. Premier Consulting Partner is the highest tier that AWS has as far as their consulting partner status. So in order to achieve that level, when you look at others that have achieved the Premier Consulting Partner status, you're talking about your Accentures of the world, your Deloittes, your CGI Federals, all of the big boys, right? And here's an SDB-OSB, JHC Technology, right? It speaks to the volume that we're doing within AWS as far as an infrastructure reseller component. It also speaks to the experience, the customers we've worked with, the solutions that we've deployed, as well as the training and certification of our staff. There are high thresholds as far as staff certification is required. JHC Technology puts a really big emphasis on making sure that our folks are properly trained and certified in the cloud technologies we're working in. So where have we done some of these work, right? This is really important in the government world, right? Nobody wants to be first. So where have we done it? We've done it lots of different places. Throughout the Department of Commerce, USPTO and NOAA. NIH, I like that. I heard NOAA in there, right? Yeah. NOAA is an awesome customer because they do a lot of really cool things as far as big data and networking, just neat stuff all the way around. Department of Interior at USGS, a really fantastic group. Really cool things we're doing there. Federal Reserve of Minneapolis, Department of Defense, everywhere within the Department of Defense, right? Public sector at DHS. USCIS, CBO, right? This is an incredible list of different government agencies that we've worked with in the public sector in the US federal government. But it's not limited to the federal government. As far as worldwide public sector for AWS, that involves higher education, state and local, the nonprofit sector. Getting the bits and bytes up to the cloud, we get that. layering on where you've got to be as far as your compliance requirements are concerned. Do you have HIPAA needs? Do you have FSMA high needs? How does somebody explain the difference between FedRAMP and FSMA? I have to do that a lot more than I expect to have to do, just as an FYI. So if you can figure out the difference between FedRAMP and FSMA, you're going to be at the head of the line within agencies, within organizations. Some cool nonprofit customers, the Boy Scouts, National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, the Bezos Family Foundation, and pretty up in the AWS thing. Really cool to work with some of these folks. So, CloudSmart. What's the foundation? Where does this work for the federal government? Right? From cloud.cio.gov. It's all about equipping agencies with the right tools. Right? Understanding the mission needs. Building the foundation. So we want to look at redefining cloud computing with CloudSmart. Right? We had the first iteration of this Cloud First in 2010, and now we've moved into CloudSmart. And what we're going to see as we talk throughout the course of the day today is that CloudSmart, Zero Trust, TIC, we're starting to take the world of cloud, which is what Cloud First wanted to look at. We want to look at everything in 2010, but we don't really know what cloud is. It's kind of a thing, right? But we don't really understand it. And now with CloudSmart, we want to start narrowing that focus. We want to understand that we can be more secure foundationally at the data. Instead of being out at the network, we say, okay, we're going to track what's accessing the data. So as we talk throughout the course of the day today, it's taking a look at the structure within that cloud relationship, getting away from the network, getting down to the data. We're shifting away from the benefits. What's been interesting over the past 6 years with JHC technology is that we are getting away from that huge conversation that was, well, how much is it going to cost? It's going to be cheaper, right? Which one's cheaper, right? That's starting to go away, right? Everybody's understanding if we're doing cloud the right way, we're able to save some money. We're not necessarily going to save money tomorrow, so if you're trying to cut your budget by the end of fiscal year 19, right, you're going to need to look at a little further down the line for that. But what does that look like? And we're getting away from the cost, and we're getting away, what are the benefits? How are we accelerating for our customers, right? And so CloudSmart is saying, all right, we're away from this kind of giant view of cloud, and let's start taking a look at what those benefits are. How do we speed up adoption? How do we speed up efficiency for our customers? We're enabling the rapid development of the private sector in the public sector. Let's account for the impact versus the cost. Let's understand where our benefit lies between the two. Let's account for the impact versus the risk management. Understanding where are we facing risks? Where are we imagining risks? Let's find the right place in there to be able to talk about those, be able to define those. And let's gather the requirements. What are the risks? What do you envision the risks to be? And how do we find ways to mitigate that? So we're starting to see a lot more of that, again, versus somebody saying, well, it's 10 cents an hour. You sure we can't get it for 7 cents an hour? Okay. So key actions for CloudSmart, technology neutral. Right? It's not about product A, product B, or product C. It's about what's the right blend for what we're doing today. What are the products? Is a little B and a little C? But that's what CloudSmart's trying to enable for you. Let's take a look at the products specifically, and how do we pick and choose the right components that are going to make sense for my organization, from a performance, from a security, and from a cost perspective. Utilizing vendor-based solutions, right? SaaS solutions. Using things like Office 365, using AWS for infrastructure, using workspaces. Agency-hosted solutions, right? Where can we take advantage of some of those shared services? Where can we avoid duplication? Where can organizations work together? And you know what, at this point, I am less concerned with the Department of Education coordinating with the Department of Commerce. But what I'm really interested is those groups within education coordinating among themselves. Let's discuss, right? Finding ways within the agency to centralize, to share. We're able to do these kinds of things today. Cloud Smart really, again, benefits, right? Focused on how can agencies share. Let's start there, right? That's a good place to start. And then we can start looking at how do we do these things interagency as well. Multi-cloud, big one today, right? And it's at this point less about I want to put half of my systems in one cloud and half of my systems in the other, and we're going to figure out a way to make them talk. Because that isn't necessarily the most feasible way to do cloud architectures today. We're just not there yet. But what we're seeing and what Cloud Smart is allowing, and it goes back to that kind of technology neutral, is we're seeing agencies and procurement opportunities that are saying, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing yet as far as the clouds are concerned, but I want the three major ones. And then we'll figure it out from there. What vendor can provide me access to the three major clouds? And then we'll figure out. Hybrid solutions. We talk about hybrid, let's always remember, it is not just hybrid on-prem in the cloud. It's hybrid between clouds. It's hybrid between utilizing AWS and then utilizing a SaaS platform from somebody else, or a PaaS, right? There are hybrid solutions among the clouds as well, too. So Cloud Smart is saying, again, we're not going to function on just the very specific, we're not going to put it in this box. We need to understand that there is such rapid technological innovation that we need to be able to have the access to all the various tools, and let's plug them in. So when you're thinking about your technology solutions, when you're thinking about zero trust, when you're thinking about ultimately trusted internet connections and CAP access points, you're starting to think about what are the different pieces that I can have that are going to meet my requirements. It's about modernization in Cloud Smart, right? I think this sets a really, really good foundation. It is not a set it and forget it. It's modernization with iteration. We're going to do something today. We're in, we're good, awesome. New service comes out from AWS just this morning. New improvement to that service comes out this afternoon from AWS, right? How do we move along that process? How do we iterate there? How do we establish our policy guidance and requirements to allow it in the first place? Right? Being very understanding of the fact that cloud is iterating rapidly. How do we make sure that our policy allows for that? How are we looking across the entire portfolio? Again, what's working, right? This goes back to the discussion about within the department, right? Within your portfolio, where can you find opportunities to say, well, you know what? We're doing something here. No reason to recreate that wheel there. Let's make sure that we're doing this. Things like Cloud Center of Excellence, which is a topic discussed earlier in this in conference. Shirley Ivan from AWS talked about Cloud Center of Excellence. It's something I spent a couple of conferences last year talking about, including on this stage a year ago, both here in DC and in Ottawa. Cloud Centers of Excellence. They're going to help you take a look across your entire organization. What can you do around containerization? Right? You want a buzzword? Anybody wants to take a buzzword back today? Containerization. There's your buzzword. So you go ahead and utilize that. Right? Taking a look at how do we encapsulate applications and systems? How do we take them and be able to be portable across different clouds? Right? Again, because we're getting away from that broad look and understanding with Cloud Smart, how can we be more specific? How can we just focus on what we need to focus on and not get bogged down with all of the other pieces? And we're reviewing at the agency CIO level, top down. We want to get away from everybody doing their own thing in the silos, which I'm very aware is much easier said than done, right? In today's government, right? Today's commercial organizations are the same way too, so don't think you're alone, right? How do we get away from some of those silos? We get away from it by having the CIO start to say, I want to see everything. I want reporting, I want to understand it. Talk to me. Right? This is how we start getting into those components where the agency is able to say, you know what, hold on, we're doing this here. We're not going to do the same thing over here. Let's get them together. So maturity. So in the Cloud Smart focus, there are really three important areas: security, procurement, and workforce. If you can handle those three components, you are a long way to being very successful within the Cloud Smart methodology. So let's talk about some of those objectives. Security, right? We're going to touch on this. Trusted internet connections. Where are we today? Where should we be going in the future? We have a draft version of TIC on the plate. What does it mean? Why should we be adopting it? Continuous data protection and awareness, right? All the time. What are the tools that are available that allow us to track data 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? And more importantly, while I'm home having dinner with my family, how am I going to get some notification that something went wrong? I don't want to find out tomorrow morning. I don't want to find out on a quarterly basis, right, when we go back and do a review. I want to find out right now that something went wrong. And then I also want to make sure that I'm including components in there that are going to allow me to fix it, either myself or have it be fixed automatically. And how does FedRAMP fit into this? What is FedRAMP? Why is it different than FSMA? Or how is it related to FSMA, right, as we talked back that earlier. Procurement, category management, service level agreements, not just an hour to respond. So what are some of the other components we think about as far as service level agreements are concerned? Security requirements for contracts, right? Understanding how you're making sure that you're validating the components around security within contracts. Workforce, this is a big one. Really, really important. Both at the government level, in the private sector, nonprofits. Everybody wants to know, how is this going to impact my workforce? People going to lose their jobs? I don't want to lose my job, right? It's not about that, right? There are still needs for these components, but the tools that you're using to do it, well, they're changing. So how do you enable your workforce to keep up with that change? Recruiting, retaining the current federal employees, and finding and addressing your skills gaps. So those are three really, really important pieces. So we start with security, trusted interconnections. First introduced in 2007, right? We wanted to help consolidate the number of external connections, right? Fewer egress points. We're able to monitor it with actual devices, right? Einstein devices, talking at that network level on the outside. How are we tracking this? TIC implementation is currently on v2.2. What does version 3.0 mean, right? Allowing agencies to use modern technologies. We want to collaborate and innovate, right? We want to see those pilots. TIC implementation, TIC draft, v3.0 wants to see pilots. And how does that process work? So we'll talk some more about that here in a little bit. Streamline the verification process. Certainly important as far as automation is concerned within TIC. Developing compliance verification processes. We're going to talk a lot today about repeatability and about structure and about process. Continuous data protection and awareness. Identities, your credentials. How do you make sure that you are limiting your access appropriately? Your access management, thinking about least privileged administration, thinking about encryption. The cloud gives you so many different tools. AWS has checkboxes. Come on, it doesn't get easier than that. Checkboxes to allow you to encrypt your information. If you don't want to use AWS encryption services, well, guess what? You can encrypt yourself before you send it. Right? So many different options out there. For FedRAMP, standardizing the security assessments, the authorization, and the continuous monitoring. Taking advantage of the services that the FedRAMP program offers to you as an organization or as an agency. What about on procurement, right? CloudSmart is encouraging you to take a look at a couple of different components. Category management, really important. It improves the buying process, right? We're trying to get away from the redundancies. We're trying to increase the adoption of cloud, right? So we want to take a look at what can we do as an agency to be able to start bundling some of these things together. What do we look at as the right cloud procurement vehicle? Does everybody need their own vehicle? No. So where are we looking? Where should we be looking to take advantage of the right cloud vehicles for my agency or organization? Service level agreements, defining the expectations for the level of performance, right? Understanding the client, customer, contractor roles and responsibilities, getting very clear around that component. Setting performance metrics that make sense in a cloud environment. And also, what are the remediation actions that are taken? You've got the performance metrics. Are you meeting them? Are you not meeting them? What do we need to do as far as remediating those components that you're not meeting? So really diving into a cloud procurement and understanding How do we define those service level metrics? Is it all about 15-minute response times? Not really. It's certainly important, but what else matters? Cloud Smart is encouraging you to figure out what else matters. And the security requirements for contracts. Enabling visibility to your high security assets, right? Really important. It's not just about the security of the personnel or the security requirements that you have as far as compliance is concerned, right? It's saying, hey, these are my most critical components. How do I make sure that I'm securing them appropriately so I can see what's going on within them? We want to employ the security and privacy concepts, least privilege administration, making sure that the people that need to know about it can see it and can get notified about it. And then what about the workforce? You've got to identify skill gaps. They're there. Today's workforce, today's federal workforce, really focused a lot on legacy IT. It was a little surprising to go to a security conference a couple of weeks ago focused here in DC, about 1,000 cybersecurity professionals. There was a tremendous number that were simply asking what cloud is. So it's one thing to not know how to cloud, as they might say. It's another thing to not know what cloud is. We can help you get to the cloud. But you have to be aware today's skills need to include cloud knowledge, need to include cloud certification. There are all sorts of certification process to get yourself certified, to get yourself some knowledge, so expand that. So identify where your skill gaps are. Do you have developers? No? Okay, well, there's a gap. Do you have somebody that knows how to architect to meet your compliance requirements? No. Okay, skill gap. So, how do we reskill or retrain those employees? Okay, let's teach them how to map. Let's teach them how the services work, right? Start getting in there and saying, okay, identifying your resources that want to learn, that are raising their hand in the meeting. Say, I'll give it a shot. Excellent. JHC Technology is a training partner. Let's teach you how to get where you're going. What tools are available out in the general public domain? What tools are available on AWS in order to enable your workers to start going down the right path, to understand these components? And then, if you don't have that in-house, if you don't have the hand raisers, what do we need to do to recruit and hire? Do you know the questions to ask? Where can we find them? How do we know that the person has the certification that they say they have? Right? All these kinds of things. How do we change the structure? How do we change the way we're looking for employees that have cloud skills? Where can we engage them? Right? Cloud Smart is saying, you know what? Let's take a look on social media. Where can you start finding folks? What do we need to do to adjust the way that USA Jobs operates in order to make sure that we are getting the skilled individuals that we have? And quite frankly, how are we doing it fast enough? Because that's a huge problem in the federal government space. So employee communication, engagement, and transition strategies. We hear all the time employees being very concerned about, now the cloud's in, well, what's going to happen to my job? You know what? Probably nothing. Here's the plan, and here's where we expect you to be a part of it. And if you're communicating and engaging your employees in this way, if you're talking them through the transition strategy, you're going to start making them feel much more comfortable. You're going to start getting them to understand where they're going to have success. Because let's be quite honest, we're seeing the cloud go this direction. There's a need for cloud people going in that direction. If you're not willing to do cloud, you're not going to go in that direction. So we've got to find ways to incentivize. We've got to find ways to retrain. We've got to engage our workforce. Cloud Smart really focuses on engaging the workforce. Removing the bureaucratic barriers to hiring USA Jobs, right? What are ways that we can do to kind of shrink that timeline a little bit? Hiring the talent expeditiously. Got to be able to scale our talent in some capacity. So what are some of the tools, right? Cloud Smart is leaving some of those foundations open to say, okay, organizations, agencies, figure it out. What works? We're willing to work with you. What makes sense for you as an organization? So now we understand Cloud Smart. We're all experts. Let's talk about Zero Trust Networking. Right, really important piece here. If you have not seen this graphic before, take a picture. If you don't want to take a picture, search shared responsibility. If you're going to have the foundation to do cloud appropriately, It's going to be right here. The AWS shared responsibility model. See, I like this. People coming in from outside to take a picture of the shared responsibility model. This is critical. If you can understand the shared responsibility model, and it's not that hard to understand, I do, you're going to be ahead of 75% of the game. You're going to be able to understand the benefits that cloud offers. You're going to be able to think about the different services and what they provide and where they fit on that map, and how blue are they? How yellow are they? Right? Understanding where that line is. Because AWS is providing you a foundation, you have to know what to do with it. I can't tell you the number of S3 data breaches I read about because somebody clicked the button to make a bucket private or a public. Really? That's what they did. They left it public because they wanted people to have access. Yeah, well, guess what? Everybody gets access. So how does that work for you? Right? But again, we're right back to the knowledge and the skills gap, right? Understanding how to close that. So this is a really, really important model here, the AWS shared responsibility model. So zero trust networking, segmenting access within a system to internal and external zones. We start thinking about where that looks like. Internal, within my accreditation boundary. External, on the other side of the accreditation boundary. And then typically, where has that TIC zone been? Right between the internal and external zones. So we got to think about those kinds of components. It's about not trusting any user. Right, because we're starting to shrink down some of this component to be right around the data. So we're getting away from necessarily all the way out at the top of the network. We get right in, and we're able to have a lot more visibility and a lot more security when we're putting these components right by the data. And verification required from everyone. That's just not everyone as a person. That's everything within your system. Should it have access? Why? And what are the tools in which you're able to enable that access? Stages in the zero trust model, identity assurance, no lateral movement, least privilege administration, least privilege access, and tracking and audit. Right? There are so many tools to track and audit. If you're not leveraging them, you're missing a huge opportunity. So let's talk about some of that. Identity assurance. Centralize your identity management. Centralize, centralize, centralize. This goes back to understanding how do we centralize our framework as an organization anyway. Federated login, right? Let's make sure that we're able to kind of roll these components through so the people that have access need to have access. And the people that don't, won't. And we're really focused on the user level. Individual accounts only. We're not going here with distribution group email addresses as far as your user. You have so many options within the cloud to be able to focus on the individual user account level. No lateral movement, privileged user management. Be able to elevate those roles. Start with the least and be able to elevate as necessary. Right? These are the granular controls that you have within an AWS environment. Make sure you're leveraging them. Common methodology across. Understand why you're getting those privileged users. Why should they have that access? Under what reasons? And automation tools wherever possible. And you can automate this access. Part of your builds. Make sure that you're doing that. Right? Part of the really important piece about TIC and why zero trust networking can help support your TIC architectures is because TIC is so interested in understanding who's doing what, when, and where, and why. Well, maybe less on the why, but who's doing what, when, and where, right? Well, there are tools that can allow you to see who, what, and when, where. Leverage those tools within the zero trust model. Again, we're putting this stuff by the data, by the system, within the system. You can really start being very granular about how you're tracking who's accessing what they're accessing. Least privilege administration, just for the task at hand. There's no reason to have people have global access administration capabilities. So let's focus on what makes sense for the task. Let's focus on the role of something like an EC2 server and what access it has to do the things it needs to do, much less on the role that Joe or Susie has as well. So it provides stability, security, and ease of deployment because you can start automating this. You have your identity assurance plan. You're able to understand who gets what access, why, when, and where. We're rolling this out, least privileged. Start restrictive and build up. And let's remember, when we were talking about AWS, when you talk about starting restrictive, AWS by design is denial, period. So unless you change that, it's denial. right? You talk about security and having least privilege access. Deny all is pretty least privilege, right? So you have to punch the holes to open that up. So make sure you're doing that with the structure. And when you can automate that, automate it. Tracking and audit. If you do not have CloudTrail turned on in your AWS environment, you are clouding wrong. Turn it on. Everything in AWS is an API. CloudTrail tracks all of it. We talked a minute ago about making sure that you've got individual user accounts, because guess what? CloudTrail is going to track it. We're going to know that Joe or Susie accessed it at what time. CloudTrail needs to be on for everything you do. You need to be able to have those logs. Utilizing tools like CloudWatch, or a litany of third-party tools that are available to support these kinds of activities. Leverage those components. And multi-factor authentication. We're all doing MFA, right? Right? Yeah, look, everybody's nodding. Perfect. I didn't have to tell you guys. But if you're not, enable it, right? These things are clicks of a button. Enable that. So, how do we accelerate zero trust, right? Deny all, out of the box. Bingo. So let's make sure that we're not doing things that compromise that in any way. Gather your requirements, right? We talked throughout here today about centralizing some of this information. So let's do that requirement gathering. Let's understand what our requirements are. Let's get them, especially if they're written down. They're not always written down. And if they're not identified, if they're not clearly spelled out, you're behind the 8 ball. So with zero trust networking and understanding exactly what you need to secure, exactly who needs access, all that stuff comes through requirement gathering. Only open the necessary communication paths, right? Or deny all, so if you're punching holes in there, it's because something has to talk between themselves. So make sure we're doing that appropriately. We cannot do that appropriately if we have not gathered the appropriate requirements. Templatize your architecture. We are really, really excited to be a launch partner for the ATO on AWS program. That was announced yesterday during Teresa's keynote. We are one of 24 companies that are on there, a lot of ISVs, so a lot of technologies, and you've got a system integrator like JHC, right? Because we're really interested in saying what are the right technologies here, 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 and here to be able to put into your architecture that makes sense for your agency, to make sense for your workloads. So ATO on AWS is a great program. If you haven't seen Tim Sandage talk about it from AWS, I certainly recommend that you do that. Tim is a great speaker. He's been working on ATO for a very long time. We're extremely excited to be part of the ATO on AWS program. It's looking to take the time frame from a year or 2 years to an ATO and shrink it to 60 days. That's pretty good. It's good for a timeline. It's good for adoption. And it's wicked good for cost, right? We're starting to take that $1 million to $2 million cost tag, and we're going to shrink that down because we're not spending a year or two doing this. Review for the gaps. Utilize your CloudTrail. Utilize your audit, your monitoring. Look for the components that are missing. Leverage the native tools to be able to address those gaps. And zero trust for management, right? Administrative access. It's not just the network management. It's the administrative access to the management console. Let's make sure that we're doing this appropriately, right? Start with the least amount, add in a little bit more because there's a requirement for that, which is documented, and then get yourself up to the top where necessary. So be very, 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 very sharp about that. For zero trust, what things that help, this is a known architecture. AWS isn't a surprise. It's not the new kid on the block, right? It is a known architecture. It has gone through the FedRAMP process. It has ATOs at the moderate, high level, and the low level. Leverage those. This is not a surprise. You're building an architecture on a platform with standardized tools. Use them. And test for compliance, whether it's cloud native or third-party tools. Always be going through, looking for compliance. Again, continuous on this piece, right? We can do this with the tools that are available. And there are so many of these tools that just snap directly into your infrastructure. You can launch them through AWS, for goodness sakes, right into your environment. There should be no reason that you're not doing this continuous monitoring. So test for your compliance on an ongoing basis. So now we've got zero trust, and we understand that there are certain things that we can do within zero trust that we have been trying to do with trusted internet connections. Those days are gone, right? We don't need to have 50 different egress points for the entirety of the US government. That is crazy, right? It's difficult to architect to. It's difficult to make sure that you're able to be as scalable as you want to serve your constituents. And you can be more secure when you're protecting data at the level, less about protecting it there with an Einstein box, right? Or Einstein 2 and talking about security threats that are already identified and tracking against those, right? How can we leverage tools within the cloud that are going to be able to identify some of those things that we haven't already done? So we're currently on version 2.2 of the TIC reference architecture, but we've got draft version 3.0 out there, so I think it's really, really important as well. So we talk about if the CSP environment is external, we got to make sure that we're going through a TIC in today's version 2.2, right? If the CSP environment is internal, we talk about coming out from the boundary to the CSP environment, not required to go through a TIC. So there starts to be some interesting conversations within the organizations about what does or does not constitute internal, external traffic, and whether it needs to come across the TIC or not. Those are the version 2.2 components. Right, so we need to pick the right tools. Talk about identity and access management, CloudFormation and CloudTrail. Right, CloudFormation for automation, CloudTrail for your audit and tracking. Are you using CloudWatch? How about CloudWatch logs? VPC pairing, right? All of these different networking options. Are we using VPC flow logs? Are we gathering the data appropriately from that? Right? These tools exist. They're already there and they're native. And they can be a part of what you're doing. So you should be able to pick the right tools, understand how these things work within that shared responsibility model, right? Understanding where those gaps are. So what's TIC look like today, right? I mean, listen, we talk about the cloud service provider, they're gonna have the remote users gotta come through the TIC and then through the, right? This is a mess. It's a mess, right? Let's find ways in which we can make this more accessible. We've dealt with some organizations where they felt that the traffic to their public website from external users had to go through a TIC, just to the public website. I don't think so, right? So what's that mean? It means that we are iterating on TIC today. Version 3.0 is in draft, and again, we're talking about taking advantage of the commercial side, taking advantage of the amount of components that AWS has put out there that have gone through the FedRAMP process at this point, or taking advantage of understanding the innovation, right? And how does that innovation help agencies continue to modernize? A defense across the architecture, right? Endpoint, right? We're talking about what tools just to get this protected and not have to have one set of tools where everything gets protected and you get beyond that, now you've got free reign. So let's be very granular about what we're doing. They want to see new use cases for TIC, for Cloud Access Point. We want to understand what those use cases are looking for. And version 3.0 says, you know what? Yes, let's find out some more about those use cases. And if we like them, we're going to go forward with them. Right? We're going to put that process behind. We're going to do the pilot. We're going to initiate the pilot. We're going to approve the use case. We're going to get feedback. And then we're going to push that to acquisitions. Right? Because again, we're looking at benefits. It's all about benefits, and there are different ways to get from point A to point B as far as benefits are concerned. We talk about ATO on AWS, right? You're going to start seeing a lot more of that within the federal government. Let's shrink that timeline by using a standardized and templatized version to move forward. When we start talking about TIC requirements, guess what? Those things are going to be a part of that. Right? They're estimating that between 80 and 90% of TIC requirements are met when the cloud service provider gets a FedRAMP assessment. We're already 80 or 90% there just by utilizing somebody like AWS. We need to understand there's a small window to close there. But as we do that with templates, we do that with the ATO on AWS program, we start again, right? Shrinking that window. Let's take advantage of cloud. Some benefits of the version 3.0 framework, native services. Let's be very, very specific about the capabilities that are already there today. We're not reinventing the wheel. Take advantage of commercial innovation. Third-party tools, infrastructure as code, right? The TIC requirements that you have, taking a look at who's doing what, when, and where, you can start incorporating into what you're deploying. And guess what? You can set that, and then repeat it with code. So CSPs, in particular AWS, constantly innovating, right? If you're following AWS at all, there's like 4 announcements a day about different iterations. right? Either it's a new service or it's a slight change to an existing service, right? So, constantly iterating. Leverage that. Version 3.0 gives agencies that capability. Leverage that innovation. And as cloud expands, logging tools are ever vigilant, whether that's native tools, third-party tools. Leverage those tools to get the information that you need to be able to have visibility across the environment. There are so many positives with TIC 3.0. We've got to keep an eye on that. The draft is already out. Comments are already back. We encourage it. It makes sense. It's about innovation. Take advantage of the things that are out there. So we've covered Cloud Smart. We've talked Zero Trust. We've talked TIC and V 3.0. I appreciate everybody taking the time. Really important, really, really important that you go onto the app, fill out the survey. This isn't the first time you heard this. Go onto the app, fill out the survey. What was good? What was bad? Tell us about it. Really, really important. It's great for us to have the feedback from that survey, so I really, really hope that you'll spend some time to go do that. We have a few minutes left. If there are a couple of questions, I will do my best to field them. There's a microphone right in the middle of the room as well, too, so line up. And we'll take this for, we've got about 4 minutes or so left. We'll work through some questions that you might have. If I can't answer them, come see me when we're done, and I'll get you connected with those that can answer them. Is that microphone, we get that microphone kicked on? Okay, I'll hear you.
You were describing TIC 3.0.
Yes.
The issues for us are things like it needs to go through the TIC before it goes to our CSP or AWS cloud that's internal, and then often have to go back out again and then goes in. Are there, in part of this, are there going to be attempts to enable traffic from the outside to go directly to our own internal, AWS cloud pieces without having to first, hairpin through the TIC and then back out again? This is an old question that's been around for a while.
Right.
And last time, they never agreed on an answer.
No, and that's a good point, right? So you're talking about, again, how are we going to determine whether we have to go through a TIC setup or not, right? Because again, previously in V2.2, again, we're looking at TIC on the outside, right? And I think it's really important to make sure that we're having those discussions about architectures and we're protecting data internally. We need to be able to replicate what TIC wants us to do, and there are tools out there that are going to enable that. The challenge that you're going to have is people that have said, listen, I've been doing this since 2007. This is what we're doing. I'm not changing. And you've got to find ways to say, okay, listen, let's go back to the requirements. This is all about requirements. What are your requirements? What is written down about the requirements with your traffic? Okay, here are the requirements. Here's the architecture, and you can see the flow. Version 3.0, talking about pilots, talking about other use cases, they're going to want to see that. If you can start bringing those pilots, those use cases with your agency, then it's going to allow the V3.0 groups to be able to say, you know what, yes, we've got a new pilot, we've got a new use case, a new architecture, this makes sense for us, let's move forward with it. We're going to give the thumbs up to it, right? But it's about those pilots and it's about the understanding. It's really about the knowledge gap, I think is the big thing. Questions? Microphone is there. I really, really appreciate it. Again, Matt Jordan, JHC Technology, thank you so much for spending some of your Wednesday with me. Appreciate it.